Hello, everyone, and welcome in. My name is Bryce Koon. We welcome you into this edition of Swarm Talk, and man, it's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a fun next couple of weeks as we get ready for the start of just bottom line. We get ready for the start of college football season. Georgia Tech, Florida State going to be kicking that off in 2.5 weeks, and it brings us to a point where we're going to really be able to talk a lot about positional previews. We're going to have our prediction show here in a little bit, and we're just going to be talking some good old college football on the channel as well. So make sure you subscribe if you have not already. If you're subscribed to the channel and you're a fan of another team, this is the Georgia Tech centered show that we have over on the Crowded Booth. My name is Bryce Koon. This is Swarms Talk, and I will be remiss if I do not add, you got to check out Section 103. Fantastic stuff that they have going on over there. The presenting sponsor of our Georgia Tech show. They do great work. It's the best gear that you're going to be able to find out there on the market in terms of Georgia Tech fan-centered gear. It's tailored towards the fan for a market that doesn't have a lot of great options. This is probably the best one, hands down. You can use code Crowded Booth for 10% off your order today, and they do a fantastic job. And we love having this partnership with them. It's been good. It's been a lot of fun. And we can't wait to roll into another season. This will be year number 3 of us teaming up with Swarm Talk here teaming up with Section 103 and Swarm Talks. We're excited for that. We've got a loaded show, and Ralph and Will are not here, but I'd be remiss if I don't already say it. Let's get ready. Let's talk college football. Let's talk Georgia Tech on this episode of Swarm Talk, brought to you by the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. Coming on the Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as we get ready to lock and load. And tonight, we talked 2 weeks ago. We're going to get back into the regularly scheduled show times and everything like that. But last night we talked about, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the running backs. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look at the wide receiver rooms. We're going to have another episode on a Thursday taking a look, at tight ends, and we can look at that here too. But I think there's just a couple of points that I want to be able to make. And let's go ahead and get to some of the early comments. John Burns says, here again, we may have the strongest room in the ACC. We are going to talk about that. Maxwell says, let's go. He also becomes a member. My boy Maxwell, he said, guess who just became a member finally? Make sure you can do that. Support the show and do that as well. Matt's got the right idea. He says, hit that like button, ladies and gentlemen. And then Power Tech, always a loyal follower and watcher and listener of the show, says, go Jackets. Let's talk a little bit about this wide receiver room, because I think that when you look at what they bring to the table, just in terms of this team ran the ball so well last year, and we talked a lot about that. Like 12th nationally, they led the ACC. Jamal Haynes King with his legs did a lot of different things very well, I will say. Did a lot of great things, very well for this team. But the passing game at times, it was Eric Singleton. You saw Haynes King kind of zero in on Eric Singleton. Chase Lane's early season injury, I think, kind of kind of put a little bit of a damper on what we thought could be a good big season. We'll talk about Chase Lane, and we'll talk about Malik Rutherford, who I think is one of the more steady wide receivers that we're not talking about nationally in the college football landscape. And I say we in terms of being a part of the media outside of the Georgia Tech sphere when I do my 9 to 5 job. Malik Rutherford's got to be up there in terms of a guy that you can see make some strides and can see, make an impact. But it's just kind of quietly. He just does it every single week. So I don't think it's going to. I think that this offense has a chance. And in order for this offense, I'll say this has a chance to be better. In order for it to be better than last year offensively, great offense last year. We're going to talk a lot about limiting turnovers. I'm going to talk about how the wide receiver room can help Haynes King do that. But I think that this group has the most pop potential out of any offensive room. Jamal Haynes is going to be a nationally known guy. He already is. I mean, what he did last year led the ACC in rushing. He's going to be up there again this year, I believe. Haynes King. Okay, like nationally, people are going to know who Haynes King before he got to Tech, and now they saw he had a great season in Atlanta. But this is the room for me where if Georgia Tech wants to take the jump, and let's just say the leap from contender, for a spot in Charlotte, which I think they can be this year, to one of the favorites, like one of the teams that you can say, okay, they're a legit top 3, top 4 ACC team. This group has to pop off the paper. I think that when you get 3 of your top 4 wideouts back, that's obviously huge. And Singleton, Rutherford, and Christian Leary, that's going to help, immensely in terms of what you're able to bring to the table when you look at this room, when you look at the names that are there. So we're going to dive into some of the big topics that I have. Want to get your questions in towards the end of the show. Get a couple comments here. Matt says, I'm curious to see how Leo is going to do. That's a big storyline throughout fall camp. Key to Success says, let's talk about the wide receivers, how wide receivers are going to shine because defense is going to try to over-focus on our run game. I do agree with you there in that sense. Murphy47 says, Leo is the guy that I'm most excited for. I really hope he stays healthy. Matt says Malik Rutherford is such a solid wide receiver. And Ultima, appreciate you tuning in. And said, I'm way more excited for this year over any other since CPJ and the boys who won the Orange Bowl. Go Jackets. Appreciate you tuning in. Okay, so let's talk here about the wide receiver spot. And this is going to be the obvious. For the diehards, they're going to be like, okay, yeah. My first question for this room is can Eric Singleton be better? And what does that look like? Does it look like a room where you can have a bona fide dude and that be the guy that carries the room? I think this room is pretty deep and talented. I'll get to that later. But can Eric Singleton be better than he was last year? He was very, very good, like very good last year. He showed essentially that Georgia Tech can recruit in this state and find gems. That's massive. And you have a guy that got better as the season went along. He's got the track speed. I think that this is a season where when you look at what it's going to take for him to get better, I would just say, and this is not a knock on what he did last year, what he didn't do. It's just look, this is a kid who had flat out speed. He could take the top off of defense. Georgia Tech did not have that last year. You go into this season and you say, what do you need? You need Eric Singleton to become a crisper route runner. You need him to become that elite route runner that can get in and out of breaks, be deadly at the top of a route in the tune of the guys can't just say, okay, we're going to let him play down underneath. We just can't get beat deep. I think that's kind of the next step for Singleton, personally. Can he show that? But I think a lot of what Singleton's production level is going to be in 2024 probably gets into tune and comes with how they're going to scheme against him. And we're going to get to this is going to be a common theme where, and Maxwell says it here, and I'll go ahead and get to it. He goes, he says, if other guys become solid enough receiving threats to take a lot of the attention off Singleton, I believe he can be better. That is definitely true. But one thing I've tried to say to fans, and he's gone from 13 to 2 in terms of his jersey number, so we'll use the 2024 version. Opposing defensive coordinators are going to circle number 2 on the field. Opposing defensive coordinators are going to look and say, okay, where is Eric Singleton Jr.? We've got to take him out of the equation. try and beat us with somebody else, but we can't let that kid get loose, get free, and start building confidence. And we certainly can't let him start to build that rapport within the game with Haynes King and Eric Singleton. So you're going to be seeing, and I think that's going to be a massive task in week 0 when they face Florida State. You're going to see that. They are going to put, whether it's Fentrell Cypress or one of their other good defensive backs, they're going to, probably try to box up Eric Singleton and say, we're going to try to take away this side of the football field, and we're going to roll in and say, okay, beat us with somebody else. So the way that Eric Singleton is going to be schemed against is a storyline that I'm going to be following all throughout the season. It could have an impact. It could. Now, what's going to help, and we'll talk about later, is the other guys that I don't want to say supporting cast, because I think that's a little maybe derogatory towards the other guys. Singleton's really, really good, but I think this wide receiver room as a whole is really, really good. But just overall, when you look at what Singleton brings to the table, the speed, the yards after catch factor, if he improves as a route runner, he's going to become nearly unguardable. That's kind of the next step for him, I feel like. So the scheming against, now what can combat that? Well, if a team tries to say we're going to bracket a safety and a corner and take Singleton out and make you beat us in one-on-one, okay. If you don't do that, though, or I'll say if you do that, how do you combat that? It's going to be up to Buster Faulkner. Okay, so this is where I think everyone loved Buster Faulkner last year. I loved watching him play call, especially as the season wore on and he felt more comfortable with the tools that he had in his war chest. This is the season where it's got to pop off. And it starts with Eric Singleton, because the chess match of Faulkner against said defensive coordinator is going to be something that you hear me talk on the show each and every single week about how can you turn around and combat what they're going to scheme against. And it's going to involve Eric Singleton in the jet sweep game. You guys have seen that in College Football 25 with Christian Leary. It's going to involve moving Singleton to different spots on the field. When you look at elite receivers at the next level, a trait that you're starting, or an ability that you're starting to see with some of the top receivers taken in the NFL draft each and every single year, is they start cross-training at each wide receiver spot. They're not just pigeonholed into the inside slots position. They're not just pigeonholed into the X or the Y or the Z. Their ability to move around the formation, and they really become a guy that we just have to get the ball in his hands no matter what. That's something we saw Buster Faulkner do well last year. He's going to have to do that very, very well this season. I like the other guys in the room, but I would just say this. If Eric Singleton, if Georgia Tech's going to compete for a spot in Charlotte and be an 8, 9 win, 10 win team, Eric Singleton has to be a focal point. I don't see a scenario where Singleton's not having a monster year and you're still, getting to Charlotte and playing for a spot in the college ball playoff. So with Singleton's ability, what they're going to try to do against him, and then the Buster Faulkner's ability to scheme for it, there's a lot of things to potentially like about that matchup. It's going to be a chess match each and every single week. And then the big question is, a lot of people talk about sophomore slump. Singleton had a little bit of a slump in the middle of the season, started to pick it back up, but how much, and it goes into the previous 2 points I've made of scheming for and scheming against, how much can we really see Singleton become a superstar? I mean, the all ACC preseason teams came out. Georgia Tech was kind of snubbed from those. This is a kid who is playing in a conference with some really good receivers. But the problem is, and I think the questions, and I would say just talking from some people, is if you do it again in year 2, now you're starting to show he's a bona fide star. Now it's not just a fluke. And I'm not saying it's a fluke. I'm not saying that I think it's going to be a fluke. What I'm saying is I think the jury is still out until you can do it 2 years in a row, or put together 2 years in a row, because there's been a lot of guys that put together one great year. And I think if Singleton was here on the show, or you talk to him in media availability, he would say the same thing. You don't want to just be that guy that becomes a dude for 1 year and then just kind of fizzles out. That's why year 2 is super important. So can he ascend to superstar status? Can he be the guy that, crunch time on a 2-minute drill, they can't guard? Haynes King knows that. Buster Faulkner, Chris Winkie, everybody knows it. Everybody in the stands knows it. And the defense still can't stop it. If he ascends into that role, that's a recipe for Georgia Tech getting to Charlotte. So I I really, really like where things sit with Eric Singleton in his development in year 2. Heard some really, really good things coming out of, summer camp. Heard some, good things, coming out of spring ball and able to watch him in that spring game. So, or during spring practice. So, I really do believe that Singleton is a guy that can burst onto the scene. He's going to be able to play. And now, when I say on the scene, I'm talking nationally because within the Georgia Tech community, everyone knows who number 2 is. But inside, opposing teams and conference offices and media members around the world that may be not giving Georgia Tech the due diligence they should. Number 2 in Golden White's going to have to pop off. So that's kind of the first point. Can he be better? I think seeing increased route running, scheming for, scheming against that chess battle, and then just the superstar status that Georgia Tech needs it. And Eric Singleton has all the God given talent in the world to provide that. So that's going to be an interesting thing to kind of watch. It's going to be really good. Tobias says, seeing Singleton, Rutherford, and Blackburn all available, that's a strong list already. Hal, appreciate you tuning in. He says, I remember 1990 and 99 squads, and both of those teams had great quarterback and 4 or more receivers who were really good, and opponents couldn't key in on one guy. That is a perfect segue, Hal, to this question. I don't know. And this is for maybe the older guard of Georgia Tech fans. Is this the best depth ever that we've seen at Georgia Tech in terms of the wide receiver position? And I'm not just talking about bodies. I'm talking about legitimate players that can get on the field and make an impact. And I think we're starting to see that, with this group. Obviously, you have Christian Leary, you have Chase Lane, who battled injury in that Louisville game, and then obviously Kane tried to come back later in the year. Malik Rutherford, who I think is one of the more underrated receivers in the country, and then Leo Blackburn. So let's talk about that. I want to talk about that group of 3 first between Leary, Lane, and Rutherford. Um, it's a room that has experience. And I think when you look at your top 4 receivers, and this is not a depth chart type prediction or anything like that, but I think when you look at your top 4 receivers and you see the amount of experience plus an explosive young playmaker in Eric Singleton, there's a reason to believe that this group can be the best in the conference. There's a reason to believe why they could go off. And like Hal said earlier, you can't key in on, and Maxwell said as well, you cannot key in on just one guy. So with those 3, if you had those, I'm going to tell you first off, if you had these 4 guys, if you're running a 4 receiver set and you have Leary, Lane, Rutherford, and Singleton on the field, which I think you will see at times this year, I don't know. You can't play man coverage because all those guys are bona fide speedsters, and you can't just man up on those guys. You're going to have to play some type of zone, cover 3, cover 2, cover 4, and you're just going to have to hope that they don't run crossing routes, they don't run all the way across the formation, and someone leaks out because if Haynes King delivers an accurate ball, that could be 6 very quickly. So with those 3, it's really, really interesting. And I want to go ahead and go into my next point here is Georgia Tech has a lot of versatility in what they want to do in terms of personnel groupings in this wide receiver room. The guys I just listed, that's kind of your small, speedy, quick guys. Georgia Tech can very well go into this larger, big-bodied receiver when they, add in Abdul Jannah and Avery Boyd. And now you have a wide receiver grouping of physical guys that can go up at the point of, attack and be able to compete for these 50-50 balls. Maybe it's down on the goal line. You need to go with bigger formation. Maybe they want to run the ball like they did against UCF last year, and they want to get into some consistent run games. I think that is kind of a untold story of the maybe fall camp is the amount of combinations that McKnight and this staff is going to have, Chris Winkie, Buster Faulkner, and Brent Key are going to have in terms of just being able to mix and match options depending on who they're playing. Like maybe they're playing a team with some bigger safeties, some big corners, those NFL type corners, 6'2", 6'3", and they need a little more length on the outside. That's when you can go to some of these guys. And then Hal mentions this too, and I believe this was in response to my comment about could it be the best in the conference if Leo steps up also. And Hal, you're exactly right. If I will say this, I remember being at fall camp for Leo's first fall camp, and injuries have robbed us of watching Leo Blackburn become a star. I think anybody would tell you that this is a kid that Georgia Tech was able to get in the recruiting, sphere. Um, this kid has had all the potential in the world and still has a chance to be really, really good. And he talked with the media the day. He seems excited, and he should be in terms of being a grizzled veteran in terms of age and in terms of academic year, but not in terms of the miles that he has on him as a player. So when you look at Leo Blackburn, you could run a five. It's like if they go five wide, Blackburn can be your tight end. Your kind of flex guy. And I think that is, I think that's a major thing. Now, look, should you be banking on Leo Blackburn? Probably not. Georgia Tech has been the past couple of years. This year, you have the depth that affords you the luxury of not keying in and saying, we've got to have Leo Blackburn for this to be a formidable wide receiver room. He can still provide, but I think at this point, whatever he gives you, and I think it can be a lot, is really going to, potentially be kind of icing on the cake in terms of a wide receiver room that's already loaded. So I think Leo Blackburn being healthy is an awesome sign. It's a great storyline. I tweeted out, covering this kid when he was doing through his high school recruitment, and in terms of his first couple years at Georgia Tech. I was excited to see, and it as media members, you're not supposed to be fans or anything like that, but it's hard not to be a fan and root for a kid like Leo Blackburn. Good young man, and you start to kind of see what they could do in terms of going with those bigger matchups, going with those smaller matchups, and then just kind of mixing in guys. Blackburn is kind of that Swiss Army knife that I think, and I will say this: Brett Seither, and we'll talk tight ends too in this. House says now add Leo and Seither. Brett Seither's a weapon, but when you look at the type of players that I think Buster Faulkner could have a field day with, Leo Blackburn, a healthy Leo Blackburn, I think gives any offensive coordinator like the bug eyes. Like they are bugging out thinking about how they could utilize and draw up route concepts for him. And I think Leo Blackburn fits that bill. So if he is healthy, you have to beg the question. This might be the best depth at receiver you've had in 20 years in terms of talented guys that can get on the field and make an impact. Not just guys that are role fillers and can take up some snaps and block well, but in terms of playmakers, you might be there. Now let's talk about three young guys, and Maxwell beat me to it here. He says Isaiah Canyon was a beast on my road to glory, so maybe he'll be a dude. I got three guys that just talking with people around fall camp that have are putting in work, and I think we could see. I'm going to start with one in Zion Taylor. I think a lot of people, because of Eric Singleton's emergence, kind of forgot about Zion Taylor. Arguably, might have been the more heralded recruit in terms of what he could do. Taylor, it's a process of still learning. It's a process that I think from year one to year two for Zion, he's starting to reap the benefits of being more involved, being more in tune with what Buster Faulkner wants, and just being year two in college. That's huge. Not everyone's Eric Singleton. So Zion Taylor, that's a guy I'm keeping my eye on. Bailey Stockton is another one. This is a kid that I think that they really like his sure hands. I think they also like that he can be reliable. Um, that for me is that's going to get you on the field. Like if you're reliable enough, it doesn't matter the star rating, it doesn't matter what it is. If you are reliable enough at the wide receiver position, you'll find a way to crack the rotation and be on the field, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Can they count on you in the big situations to get open, secure the catch, and get upfield? If Bailey Stockton can show that, enough in fall camp, no reason to think he can't be in the two deep in terms of just, cracking that two deep and being involved in this pass game somehow, some way. And the last one, Maxwell kind of already mentioned, Isaiah Canyon. That's something for me. I sit here and I look at, what Canyon can bring to the table. I think it's another young player. I will tell you this. I really do feel, and I'm excited about the wide receiver talent that's being stacked in Atlanta. They're recruiting well, and we know about that. We talk about that a lot. But this is a fun room. It's a room that I think can bring a lot of competition, but explosiveness to the table too. And so I'm looking at Zion Taylor, Bailey Stockton, and Isaiah Canyon as three young guys that, just from talking with folks, have still have a ways to go. Not saying they're polished products. Even the guys we talked about in the opening aren't polished products, but they're options and they're weapons. And that's what's going to matter. And that's what's going to stand out. So we get to the final topic of tonight's show. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe and check out. You see right up there, section 103. greatest Georgia Tech gear you're going to find out there. I just kind of have two questions, and I think it goes to the people watching. Let me know down in the comments below. And if you look, if you're watching after the fact or you're listening, hit us up on social media at the Crowded Booth and kind of let us know too. What will it take? And I think kind of laid it out like what will it take for this group to be the ACC's best? Um, you kind of look at numbers wise. Stanford's got a guy in Ayaminor who had 1,060 catches, 1,000 yards last year. Colin Lacey, the South Alabama transfer that's now at Louisville, was really, really good. 1,300 yards, 91 catches last season. And then Restrepo down at Miami is another name, 85 for 1092 last year. So in terms of numbers, I just think that we sit here with what I said earlier. This might be the best wide receiver room Georgia Tech has had in 20 years. That's a real debate to have. They've had some good individual players, but in terms of, like I said earlier, guys from top to bottom, they can come in and compete, can come in and not just compete, but give you explosive reps. I think this might be it. So that's going to help them be the ACC's best. And then the biggest talking point, and when we talk quarterbacks, and we'll talk about it later this week. We'll talk about it on Thursday night. So make sure you tune into that. When we talk quarterbacks here, for Georgia Tech, like if they're going to make a run at this thing, and when I said this thing, make a run of the playoff, because a lot of people want to talk about, oh yeah, whatever the schedule. I know it came out; they're the only ACC team with a top 25 schedule. A lot of people like Virginia Tech, a lot of people like Miami, all these other programs, and I get it. Like there's a reason, there's a path to understanding why they like them. But if Georgia Tech's going to beat the odds of their schedule and they're going to win some games they shouldn't and find themselves in Charlotte at the end of the season, this wide receiver room has to be better at helping Haynes King out. Last year, Haynes King tried to win games on his own. Brent Key said after the Boston College game, we have to do a better job of helping him out. And I think that was not only the offensive line group, I do believe that was also the wide receiver room as well. And this is a group that has to get better at route running. They've got to get better at catching the football. They've got to get better at creating separation against opposing cornerbacks and safeties. If they can do that, it's going to help Haynes King out in the turnover department, which has been a much talked about thing that a lot of people are wondering why he's held back. Well, that's the reason, because of the turnovers he had last year. I think you see that number cut down not just because of his decision making, but I think you can see that number be cut down just based off the fact that the receiver plays better and it's deeper. And now you've got 5 or 6 guys that you can throw out there and you're not going to miss a beat, maybe even 7 or 8. So I think that this room has the potential to be the ACC's best. Can they capitalize on that? That's going to be really big. And then the last storyline, like I said, I'm watching is they can help out Haynes King. If they can do that, they can help out Haynes King, this offense can be top 20, top 15 in the country. The offensive line, I we'll talk about that. I'm excited about the offensive line, the running back room, but this wide receiver room, that's to me the wild card of the offense. If they make a leap collectively, better watch out. It's going to be hard for people to defend this. And I love the way Buster Faulkner calls offense. I think that he's a really good mind. You can have a field day. So if these guys take the collective jump, that's what we'll just say this, and this here might be the social media clip. If Georgia Tech's wide receivers make a collective jump in 2024, do not be surprised to see them in Charlotte. And we haven't talked about the defense yet. We'll get to that. But offensively, that's the wild card for me. If they make that jump as a group, Eric Singleton becomes a superstar. That supporting cast, becomes even more effective and explosive. It's going to help out Haynes King. It's going to help out this run game, and it's going to be one of the more deadlier offensive attacks in the country. You can bookmark that. But I think if those things happen, it would not surprise me to see them in Charlotte at the end of the season. My name is Bryce Koon, and thanks so much for tuning in live here on Tuesday night. If you're catching it after the fact, we appreciate that as well. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Give us a follow on all social media platforms at The Crowded Booth. And then head over to thecrowdedbooth.com. Sign up for our newsletter where we'll be pumping out written content in addition to what we have here as well. And, come join the community over on Discord as well. PowerTech says, Having a talented room will help the wide receivers and running backs. I do agree. I agree with you. We appreciate you so much for tuning in. Shout out to Believe. Great partnership we have with them. And I'd be remiss to say if you don't check out Section 103, they do a fantastic job too. Love partnering with them. And like Matt says, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Let's take off. Let's grow together. And let's talk about college football, Georgia Tech, and everything all fall long. You can join myself, Will Manis, and Ralph Leary. We're going to be live multiple times a week. And do not forget, we will say this right here and there. And we're going to clip this too. August 31st, myself, Ralph Leary, and Will Manis are going to be on campus for the Georgia State, Georgia Tech football game. Cannot wait to meet all of you. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a tailgate. We're going to do a show. We'll have some giveaways. We're going to have some food as well. So make sure you stay tuned to the social platforms for the final details. We're going to be releasing our location here in the next week or so. Cannot wait for you guys to hop in and enjoy. And hey, it's going to be a fun one. 8 o'clock kick inside Bobby Dodd. It's going to be rocking. It's going to be a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of fun too if they if they knock off Florida State in week 0. Make sure you stay tuned for all that content as well. Alongside he says I will be there. The Crowded Booth tailgate. Matt Hubbard says better believe I will be. I destroyed that luck button. Better believe I destroyed that like button, and I will be remiss if I don't say words are hard. Been a long day. We appreciate you. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Bryce Koon. We'll catch you next time here on Swarm Talk, the Georgia Tech podcast of the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.